This week, SCOTUS effectively killed affirmative action in higher education nationwide. Richard Lempert is a longtime law professor at the University of Michigan and an expert on affirmative action policies dating back decades. We asked him 3 burning questions about the court's decision.
This is the first affirmative action case in education in the Supreme Court, which is divided purely on partisan lines. The Constitution has not changed, only the court has changed. Opponents of affirmative action, that is the majority of the court, speaking through Justice Roberts, have argued that the 14th Amendment and by extension the Civil Rights Act were designed to be completely race neutral, and that any system which allows colleges to give any benefit to race is not amenable to judicial review, has no natural bounds, and falls short in other areas. The opponents, the dissent, first of all, points to almost 50 years of precedent, which disagrees with the current court's analysis. It points to, and I think clearly wins on this, to substantial evidence that although the 14th Amendment is written in race-neutral language, if you look at the intent of the framers and of the Congress that proposed the amendment, the intent was to ameliorate badges of slavery. It was not to protect whites from efforts to ameliorate badges of slavery. I fear for the future. I myself have always been a committed integrationist, and I think this decision will clearly, in the shorter run, make our more selective schools less integrated. In the longer run, I think it has negative implications for the integration of society, particularly at the highest levels in the professions, in business, in the military, perhaps, and in other areas. But beyond that, the most immediate result is almost certainly going to be a relatively large fall off in the number of Black and Latino students, and particularly Blacks, since Latino students are both increasing in numbers and tend to do somewhat better on test scores and GPAs than Blacks, or at least have more people who do better because there are so many Latinos in our population. But we're going to see this fall off. We'll see schools try to adjust. Some will do everything they can, I believe. Others may say, okay, we're just not going to risk a lawsuit, or we did it because our students demanded it, now we can tell them we can't do it. So there's a lot of shaking out to be done. I wish they knew the benefits that affirmative action bring to all students on college campuses, including white, majority, and Asian students. That because of affirmative action, we have, like at the law school I attended, for example, a journal on race and law. It would not exist, I'm confident, if we had not had substantial numbers of Black and Latino students. But on that journal, there are white students. There are courses being taught. Courses respond to student demand. The second thing is, I wish they could see better ramifications in society. So for example, I and my colleagues did a major study of Michigan's affirmative action minorities in practice. And one thing we found was every ethnic group was more likely to serve people of its own ethnicity than they were than any other ethnic group. So Black lawyers were much more likely to have Black clients than white, Asian, or Latino lawyers. Latino lawyers are more likely to have Latino clients. Asian lawyers were more likely to have Asian clients, Native Americans and whites. Across the board, study done medical school showed the same thing, that Black doctors are more likely to have Black patients than patients of other ethnicity. So if they realize the degree to which the production of Black BAs go into business, of Black professionals serve otherwise and still underserved minority communities, I think their views of affirmative action might change. Third thing I wish people would know. There was a very nice study done some years ago, and I think there's also some other consistent work by 2 economists named Dale and Kruger. And what they did is they looked at the earnings many, many years after graduation of minority students, most of them had benefited from affirmative action, and white students who did not get into as highly selective a school as they might have entered had there been more places available, places that went to affirmative action beneficiaries. What they found out was that the minority students did better income-wise than similarly credentialed minority students who went to less selective schools. The white students did no worse income-wise. They earned just as much as they would have had they gone to the more selective institution. The reason is almost certainly networking, that minority students don't have access to lots of networks of power connections and the like, but if they go to a highly selective school, they meet other students, white students, they meet professors who can introduce them to networks, and even the badge of being a Harvard graduate itself breaks down implicit bias against minorities. The white students already had very good networks, and they're only losing a little bit in network connectivity by going to a slightly less selective institution. So that's the other thing. We've been helping minorities, at least if income is the measure, 10 or 15 years after graduation, without hurting whites.